listening to Thriving Mindfully podcast with Ananda Leeke. Tune in and learn how you can be present, well, and the real you from the heart. Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk about some of my beliefs about ancestorhood, when people transition, what happens when we feel loss and grief, and we move through this journey of death, loss, and grief. I want to talk about how I've been leaning into my loving, wise, and well ancestors from the Akan people, the folks that are in Ghana, the wisdom that they have infused in these beautiful Adinkra symbols that have been in my life since the 90s. I want to talk about what it's been like for the past 8 months. It's now March the 20th, the day after the first day of spring, and I have been holding in my body this grief energy and what I've been doing with it and how all of it is connecting me and helping me see and grow. And I want to talk about it all. So get ready. Here we go. So let's first take a deep breath in and then out. Bring one hand to the belly and one hand to the heart so we can connect with the body. The body holds all of our emotions. And baby, if you are feeling grief, the body is gonna hold the grief. The grief is an energy that lives in our body. It is an emotional, physical, spiritual, mental response to the loss of an experience, a loved one, a person, a belief, a way of being, and so on and so on and so on. Wow. So let's take another deep breath with our hands on our heart and our belly. Holding that breath and just feeling the breath in the body, and then releasing it slowly with a sigh. Next time I want you to inhale deeply and listen to the breath as you inhale. Hold the breath and feel it in the body. And then slowly release it with a ha. And listen to the sound of the breath. We're going to do that again. So let's inhale deeply, hands on the heart and the belly. Holding the breath, feeling it in the body. And now as you exhale the breath with a sigh, noticing the sound of the breath. So we're just taking a moment to get grounded. I invite you, if you are currently experiencing death, loss, and grief, to give yourself a hug. If you're not, give yourself a hug anyway. Every time we hug ourselves for 20 seconds or more, we are activating the oxytocin love hormone and the feel-good hormone of serotonin. And together they reduce the cortisol, the stress hormone in our bodies. And having grief energy in our bodies can give us stress. And so hugging ourselves for 20 seconds or more gets us in touch with our body and helps us release the stress that may be living in our body, especially if we're going through death, loss, and grief. So now that we are here in a more grounded space, that's my hope, I want to invite you to give yourself this gift of grace. Grace means many things to many people. For me, grace is the permission from the universe. I call it Creator, the loving, wise, and well ancestors, my spiritual tribe, to just be, to be the fuck that I want to be, the way that I want to be, to feel the way that I want to feel or need to feel or have to feel because of the experience and the journey of death, loss, and grief. So give yourself grace. We ain't perfect. We are human beings. We are spiritual beings. And as such, we gonna feel shit in our bodies. We gonna feel emotions, and yeah. So give yourself grace. I believe when our loved ones make their transition to ancestorhood, that we often feel deep losses that show up as this thing called grief. And grief for me is our response to the loss. It's the physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental response to the loss. I believe that grief is an energy that lives in our body. I believe our body is a sacred temple where our loving, wise, and well ancestors go to live in our spirit, our heart, our mind, and human structure. That's the physical part of our bodies. I also believe that our loving, wise, and well ancestors remind and speak through, they remind us and they speak through our sacred temple in ways that tell us we are loved, in ways that give us access to their love, wisdom, and protection. And I call this our ancestral medicine. That is the love, wisdom, and protection that we have been given by our loving, wise, and well ancestors. And you hear me say loving, wise, and well ancestors. And I use those three because in my journey, I have learned from my own experience of just calling on ancestors that is what has gotten me stuck. And I worked with an ancestral healing coach by the name of Jamari Michael White for a year in a few months, from 2022 to 2023, to get grounded in my understanding of ancestral healing work and also to heal the various ancestors in my own lineage on my mother's side and my father's side, and then on the other grandfathers and grandmothers and their sides. So I'm grateful that I have done that, and I continue to connect with all of my ancestors now that they're loving, wise, and well ancestors. I learned that there are some ancestors that are not well, and I was calling on the unwell ancestors, and there was no wonder that some of the areas that I needed healing in, that I was leaning into them, that things were even messier because I was trying to work with unwell ancestors. So that was a big, big revelation for me. Back to ancestral medicine. The love, the wisdom, and the protection that we get from our loving, wise, and well ancestors. I believe we get to choose how and when to access our ancestral medicine. I believe we get to invite our loving, wise, and well ancestors in. We get to seek and receive their love and support, and we get to listen to the wisdom they share. It's all about our choices. We get to choose if we want any of our ancestral medicine gifts. And I believe that they are our birthrights that we get to claim. It's a choice. Now I want to stop and ask you, what do you believe? What do you believe about anything that I've shared? And I'm going to continue to ask you, what do you believe? What do you feel? Because I'm only sharing my experience. You have your own experience with loving, wise, and well ancestors, unwell ancestors, death, loss, and grief. Each one of us is unique and has a different experience, a different understanding, and may have a different belief, and that is just fine. But I want to make sure that I give you the invitation to think about, what do you believe based on the things that I shared, and how do you define any of it? if you're called to define it. What's the experience that you've had? Because I want to honor you. So, moving forward, this year of 2024, I have been doing some deep dives into my Akan ancestral wisdom that lives in these wonderful Adinkra symbols to help navigate my death, loss, and grief with ancestral medicine. Now, for those that may not know, the Akan, AKAN, are the largest ethnic group of present-day Ghana and the Ivory Coast, located in West Africa. My paternal, loving, wise, and well ancestors are the Akan people in Ghana, and I know that because of the work we did with African ancestry. And my dad, John Leeke, took a test, and we were able to gather that information and also to learn that we are a part of the Yoruba people of Nigeria in West Africa. Adinkra symbols are these beautiful visual forms that express deep truths and reflect proverbs and concepts and wisdom that appear in cloth, clothing, artwork, architecture, furniture, and so much more. In the early 90s, I became attracted to the Adinkra symbols, and I've been using them ever since. Now, they really came alive for me when I made my first trip home to Ghana. And at the time in 1997, when I made that trip, I had no idea about the connection, the ancestral connection. It wasn't documented, that I didn't have any documentation that my paternal ancestors were also Akan people. I just knew that I felt deep in my heart, in my intuition, that Ghana was home. It felt like home. It felt like home as soon as I arrived. And I really couldn't figure out how. I just trusted that it felt like home. And so when I made my first trip to Ghana to visit Accra, Kumasi a bit, and the places where my Akan ancestors were first enslaved and walked through the door of no return at the enslaved castles. I no longer call them slave castles. I say enslaved castles in Cape Coast. I felt intimately connected to them. And I made another trip in 2003 to go back to Cape Coast and to cry and scream in the enslaved castles. And so after my first visit in 1997, I started learning more about the Adinkra symbols. I purchased clothing, Kwanzaa ceremony cloth that we still use in my family, artwork, books, cups, dishes, books, and journals with the Adinkra symbols. And using these items helped me establish a relationship with them. And I've continued to use Adinkra symbols in the tarot card work, that I lean into. There's a beautiful tarot card deck that I use. I am blanking on the name of it, but I will include it in the description of this episode. So this Adinkra symbol that really speaks to me right now in this moment is called the Sesi Wo Soban. And I hope I said that right, because I got to get on my pronunciation of the Adinkra symbol so that I am saying it correctly. So forgive me if I said it wrong. It is shaped like a sun with a star in the middle, with a circle in the middle of the star. And it is translated to mean change or transform your character. And it refers to change, growth, and transformation. And I'm attracted to it and am using it because it reminds me that death, loss, and grief are filled with big changes to my life that I can't control, that are inviting me to go through it all. The go through it all is about me acknowledging and embracing my heart's vulnerability. It's about me feeling my emotions fully in my body, not avoiding them, even if they're anger, rage, whatever it is. And then the going through it all is about me growing into a different person. And right now, I'm experiencing the grief and the loss from my mother's transition, Teresa B. Garton Leeke, her transition that occurred in July 9th, 2023. And her making her transition, mommy making her transition, brought up some other parts of grief that I hadn't dealt with and lost. And it's making me really take a look at how I have created this grief story, like about grief, the fears, the all of the stuff, all my shit is coming up. So I'm getting to see my grief story that I've been carrying since I was 6 years old when I first experienced a funeral, and that experience colored or shaped my relationship with death, loss, and grief. And so that's when my death, loss, and grief story started. And it's expanded over the years. That's another story for another time. So back to the going through process and the growth. Those two pieces are leading me to transformation, which is what this symbol means. The Seisa Wo Soban symbol. And forgive me again if I mispronounced it. Now, I don't know how all of it will happen and what the end result will be. I just know that it's going to be messy. It's going to be hard. It's going to have a lot of stuff. And it's going to definitely be uncontrollable. I also know that it's going to help me release the need to resist and support me in choosing to surrender to this death, loss, and grief journey. And when I'm able to release the resistance and choose to surrender to my death, loss, and grief journey, I'm able to embrace my intention. And my intention through all of this is to express thriving mindfully with death, loss, and grief, and accept it with grace, and get grounded no matter what the fuck I'm feeling and experiencing. And this is some major shit, y'all. It ain't easy. It is not easy. And the way that I'm navigating this, the way that I'm embracing and expressing thriving mindfully with death, loss, and grief is through softness. And I'm going to talk about that in a few. I want to say that the memory of my mother, Teresa B. Garton Leake's death, lives in my mind. I was with my mom when she made her transition. And I have this memory of seeing her as I opened the bathroom door, seeing her with her head against the tile. And I have this memory of me shaking my mom and saying, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," and calling for the nurses and saying to the nurses loudly, "This cannot be my mother's existence. This cannot, please check her for a stroke." Shaking and shaking and shaking her, and knowing that the beautiful Scorpio woman, my mother, my friend, my Sigma Gamma Rho sorority sister, one of my greatest teachers, my Shiro, that she had made her transition, even in the midst of the medical team at Anne Arundel Medical Center trying their best to revive her. The loss of my mother's physical presence in my life on Mother Earth, and the grief that I feel and probably will always feel some form of grief, that it lives in my body, that the love and the connection that I have to my mother now that she's a loving, wise, and well ancestor, lives in my heart. When I choose to let myself feel and actually do the work, because feeling this shit, all of this, all these grief emotions is work, because it takes you through. Doing the work of feeling all of my grief emotions that are housed in my body as energy happens for me in a better place when I'm nurturing myself. When I'm nurturing myself, I'm talking about what some people may call self-care. And I know sometimes to say self-care to folks that are experiencing death, loss, and grief can piss them the fuck off, because that's something that we talk about in the Western world. We say, oh, practice self-care. Even I say it in my work as a Thriving Mindfully coach, as a author, as a artist, as a human design doula. And I'm learning my own triggers when I hear those words, self-care. So I'm moving towards saying nurturing, because when I say self-nurturing or nurturing myself, I don't get triggered. Now, when I move my body with shaking, tapping, and yoga, specifically yin yoga, and other movement like walking or playing tennis, I'm nurturing myself and releasing the grief energy. One of my aha moments has come recently, and I realized after 8 months of holding the grief energy in my body, I realized my daily grief self-nurturing must include some form of movement. It's got to include some form of movement, even if it's just a child's pose in my bed from yoga. I love to do yin yoga the most with hip and heart openers, because the hips store emotions in the body. And so every time that I'm able to do a hip or heart opener, I am opening up myself and releasing and letting myself feel. A lot of times when I do the hip openers and the heart openers, I cry, I cuss, I scream, I shout. I let the emotions come through. I also love to shake up and down, because I get to feel the sensations and visualize how I'm shaking off the grief energy and the feelings, even if they come back tomorrow, the next day, the next month, and in the coming years. I now know that grieving is a lifelong practice that I can't control. It's a master class in surrender to me, and I surrender by being soft as fuck with myself. Remember, I said I was going to talk about the softness. Well, here it is. So soft as fuck is an acronym, and I'm going to share it with you in a second, but I did want to say that grieving is a master class in change that I can't avoid. It's a master class in transformation when I choose to befriend and to surrender to my death, loss, and grief with softness. Now, I want to stop you and ask you, what do you believe? What do you think? What is your experience? Because this is just my experience, and I want to honor your experience with grief, loss, and death, and what I've been sharing. Does it sound like something that you experience? Is it different? How is it different? Is it something that, you can use from any of what I've shared? Just pause this podcast or take these reflection questions with you into the next moment, the next day, and sit with them if you're called to. Now, here's the other thing that I know about grieving. This is for me. I know that grieving is a lifelong practice and process. It's a master class in surrender, and I surrender by being soft as fuck with myself. You heard me say that before. Now I'm going to go into what does soft as fuck mean. It's an acronym, and it means I slow down and offer myself freedom today. The S in soft is slow down. The O is offer. The F is freedom. The T is today. I slow down and offer myself freedom. That freedom is grace and self-nurturing that ground me. The today is a reminder to slow down and offer myself freedom, which is the grace and self-nurturing that ground me in ways I need with what I have access to in the present moment. That's the today, the present moment. Grief is also a masterclass in change I cannot avoid, which pisses me the fuck off and makes me feel mad, sad, frustrated, angry, scared, and so much more. Grief can become a masterclass in transformation when I choose, you hear me say, when I choose to befriend and surrender to my journey with death, loss, and grief by intentionally going through it. Going through it is feeling my feelings. And I would also say getting the help and support I need with my softness. And I get that help and support I need through my own self-nurturing practices, definitely through my therapist, through a variety of communities that I'm a part of, spiritual and creative communities, through my creativity, which is a part of my self-nurturing, through sharing in this podcast, through sharing the life lessons that I've learned in the Grief in You 2-day retreats that I'm offering, through reading, which is a part of my self-nurturing, and so much more. How are you dealing with death, loss, and grief? How are you nurturing yourself? What kind of help and support do you need? Those are questions that I want to leave with you. I want to leave those with you. And I don't want to leave you hanging, because part of what I'm doing during this season of my life is sharing what I'm learning and what I'm using in my journey with death, loss, and grief, and how I am embracing and expressing thriving mindfully with death, loss, and grief. And so I'm doing that through a monthly retreat series. Every month, it's a 2-day retreat, a 2-day nurturing experience called Grief in You Retreat. And the next retreat will be held on April 13th. That's part 1. And then there's also a part 2 that you get when you register. That will be held on April 21st. So April 13th is part 1, and April 2nd is part 2. April 21st. I think I said the second. Let me do it again. So the April Grief in You Retreat, Thriving Mindfully with Death, Loss, and Grief, a 2-day nurturing experience, will be held in 2 different parts on 2 different days. Part 1 will be offered April 13th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom. Part 2 will be offered on April 21st from 2 to 3:30 p.m. via Zoom. You can register and get more information by going to anandaleeke.com/events. And these are dates in 2024. So that's where we're at, and that's what we're doing. Stay tuned for some Ananda commercials. I call those my commercials with what's happening and how we can work together. And let me also say that there are dates for the retreat in 2024, the Grief in You retreat, in May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. So listen in for additional dates. Go to anandaleeke.com/events for more information if you really need it now. I'll talk to you later, and thanks again for tuning in. May you have a beautiful, peaceful, and loving kind of day. with yourself. Be soft as fuck with yourself, y'all, no matter what you're going through. Peace. Are you struggling with death, loss, and grief, and or interested in exploring how to embrace thriving mindfully with death, loss, and grief in your life, your relationships, and in your career? If you've answered yes to these questions, I want to invite you to come to the Grief in You retreat. It is a 2-day nurturing experience, 90 minutes each day, that I am leading on April 13th and 21st, May 4th and 5th, June 29th and 30th, July 27th and 28th, August 24th and 25th, September 28th and 29th, October 26th and 27th, November 16th and 17th, and then finally December 14th and 15th in 2024 from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom. Now, you can go to anandaleeke.com/events to get more information. Remember, this is a 2-day retreat, 90 minutes each day. And I'm offering it each month from April until December of 2024. We had our first retreat in March of 2024, and I learned through that experience that this should be a 2-day retreat. So I will see you at the retreat. Bye. One of the best ways to develop your own understanding of human design is by getting a reading, by getting a coaching session. And so that's what I'm offering as your human design doula. Go to anandaleeke.com/human design to learn how we can work together. If you're looking for ways to inspire and empower yourself to be present well in the real you, and you want to take advantage of some of the things that I use, check out my Amazon store. Go to amazon.com/shop/Ananda Leeke, and there you'll find the Thriving Mindfully store, which is filled with recommendations on things that I have used in my own life, relationships, and career to be present well in the real me. Check out my 3 mindfulness books, my yoga and self-love inspired novel, Love's Troubadours, my mindful creativity memoir, That Which Awakens Me, and my mindful technology memoir, Digital Sisterhood, in addition to various books, various products, essential oils, crystals, wisdom card decks, all kinds of things that I've used in my own life and spiritual and self-care practices to be who I am today, including the sound bowls that I use, the koshi chimes, the ocean drum, you name it, it's there. Check it out. Thank you for patronizing me on Amazon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Thriving Mindfully podcast. If you're ready to be inspired and empowered with my coaching support, join me in the Thriving Mindfully Academy. Visit anandaleeke.com/academy. Now, if you're ready to dive deeper and move past your comfort zone with my one-on-one coaching program, book a discovery call with me today. Visit anandaleeke.com. If you need something juicy to read, check out my 3 mindfulness books,
Love's Troubadours, a self-love and yoga-inspired novel. That Which Awakens Me, a mindful creativity memoir. And Digital Sisterhood, a mindful technology memoir. Go to anandaleeke.com/books. All of my books are available on Amazon.com. Well, that about wraps us up. And as I always like to say, may we all continue to embrace thriving mindfully in everything that we think, feel, say, and do. See you next time.